Good morning, good morning, good morning to everyone on the live stream. Hello to everyone who's in the atrium getting muffins. Get your muffins and come on in and worship with us. Welcome to Red Door.
Praise the Lord, the heavens adore Him. Praising angels in the high. Sun and moon rejoice before Him. Praise Him, all the stars align. Praise the Lord, for He hath spoken. Worlds His mighty voice obey. Laws which never shall be broken. For their guidance He hath made. All creation join the song of praise. Let every tongue declare His mighty ways. And we will sing of your goodness and mercy all of our days. Praise the Lord, for He is glorious. Never shall His promise fail. God hath made His saints victorious. Sin and death shall not prevail. All creation join the song of praise. Let every tongue declare His mighty ways. And we will sing of your goodness and mercy all of our days. Lord, glory to you, Lord. Glory, all glory to you, Lord. Glory, all glory to you, Lord. One more time. Glory, all glory to you, Lord. Praise the God of our salvation. Hosts on high, His power proclaim. Heaven and earth and all creation. Lord, and magnify His name. All creation join the song of praise. Let every tongue declare His mighty ways. And we will sing of your goodness and mercy all of our days. We will sing of your goodness and mercy all of our days.
Good morning. Morning. Welcome to Red Door. My name is Ben. This is my wife, Megan.
Good morning.
And we are really glad that you're with us this morning to sing of His goodness, to sing praise. And so we're just excited that you're here. For those of you on the live stream, thank you for joining us. Just as you come in, We just hope that this morning you can just have some stillness. You can just find God here this morning among us, with us, moving. And so we're going to continue in praise this morning. Welcome.
Worthy of every song we could ever sing, worthy of all the praise we could ever bring, worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Oh, we live for you. Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one who could ever save. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Oh, we live for you. Holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder and show me who you are and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one who could ever save. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Oh, we live for you. We live for you. Holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder and show me who you are and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. So the next part of the song, it says, I will build my life upon your love. It is a firm foundation. I will put my trust in you alone, and I will not be shaken. And this week when I was practicing with my daughter Gracie at the piano, we were singing, and when we got to this part, I just started crying, and I was like, why am I this? It just really touched me, and I realized there are so many things that we try to build our life on that are just sinking sand. And for me, we just found out a few months ago that I'm pregnant, and we're so excited because we didn't know if we'd be able to. Yeah. So yeah, a little baby bump, but the pregnancy has been really, really hard. And so within the first couple weeks, I was having really bad pains, and I was in the hospital, and we thought we were losing the baby. And I realized through that, I was just reflecting on that this week and thinking about how I think I was putting my worth as a mom and as a person and being able to hold this child and being able to grow a child. And that's sinking sand because we live on a fallen earth. At any time, I could lose this baby. and I've lost babies before, so that could happen. But just knowing that Christ is a firm foundation. There's nothing, no one could ever take Christ away from me. And so, anyway, as I was thinking through this song, I wanted to challenge you to think, what are you building your life on? Are you building it on a career? Are you building it on your health, on your family? And what you're building your life on, can it be shaken? Is it a firm foundation, or is it shifting sand? So we're going to go into the bridge of the song and sing that. And I challenge you to build your, just think about building your life on Christ and what that would look like. How putting your trust and faith in Him, for me, I realized that I would still be okay even if I didn't have the baby. Because the baby would be with Jesus. And so, now I'm just talking, so I'm going to stop. Here we go. Thanks.
I will put my deep the Father's love for us, how vast beyond all measure, that He should give His only Son to make a wretch His treasure. How great the pain of searing loss! The Father turns His face away, as wounds which mar the chosen one bring many sons to glory. Behold the man upon the cross, my sin upon His shoulders. Ashamed, I hear my mocking voice call out among the scoffers. It was my sin that held Him there until it was accomplished. His dying breath has brought me life, and I know that it is finished. I will not boast in anything, no gifts, no power, no wisdom, but I will boast in Jesus Christ, His death and resurrection. Why should I gain from His reward? I cannot give an answer, but this I know with all my heart: His wounds have paid my ransom. His wounds have paid my ransom. His wounds have paid my ransom. I'd like us to go back to the bridge of Build My Life. I just really want us to take a few minutes and meditate in those words. I will build my life. I'll put my trust. And that's really hard to do, especially, things we can't see. When fear gets in the way. So I just want us to sing this as like a prayer. Help me build my life. And and help me put my trust. Let's just meditate on that and sing that together. Help me build. Help me build my life upon your love. It is a firm foundation. Help me put my trust in you alone, and I will not be shaken. Help me. Help me build my life upon your love. It is a firm foundation. Help me put my trust in you alone, and I will not be shaken. I will not be shaken.
So I love what Becca said earlier about the things that we build our life on that are sinking sand. And I don't know if you've ever had the experience of like trying to run on the beach, not where the waves are, not where the tide is, but in the loose sand. Or maybe you've been to a desert and tried to climb a dune, right? And as you're trying to climb to the top, it is this sinking sand she was talking about. There's nothing to hold on to. The sand gives away from your feet, and it's just futile effort. You tire out so quickly. And so this morning, I just get this just sense that I've been sitting with of like just the need for rest. So I'm actually going to ask you to just go ahead and take a seat. And I want you to find a place to get comfortable. Right? You can close your eyes. Stop climbing the dune. Stop running in the sinking sand. Take a moment. Take a moment to ask God to give you rest. He says, "Be still and know that I am God." Be still. So right now, just with your eyes closed, I just want you to take a breath in and take a breath out. Know that like that breath is from God. Every breath is from Him. You're breathing Him in. And focus on just the necessity that He gives you in the next few moments, that He gives you your breath. You don't need to do anything. Just sit. Be still. Be with Him.
I think this morning, just as we were worshiping, what just really stuck out to me was just so many lines in the songs that we sang about who God is and about how He's so good and He's so merciful and He is trustworthy and He is a God who has a deep, deep love for us. And just as we're singing those things about who He is, like that's what we get to build our life on. Is who He is, a God who loves us so deeply, who is kind and good and merciful. And so I'm going to give you just a little bit of space just to spend some time in prayer, just praising Him for who He is, for that He is a God who is the same yesterday, today, today and tomorrow, that those things that he is, that they never change. And that's the firm foundation that we can build our lives on. So I want you just to take a few minutes and just spend some time in prayer, just praising him for who he is. And I don't know about you, but I know that just me, so often I think I just forget. I forget who God is, and I forget that he's good, that he's kind, that he has a deep love for me. And that's when things start to feel shaky, and my foundation feels like shifting sand, because I've taken my eyes off of the one who says he is good, our Father who loves me. And so I'm going to give you just a little bit of space to actually just confess those areas in your life where you've taken your eyes off of him, where you've maybe even forgotten who he says he is, that he is kind and good and merciful. And just confess those areas to him and ask that he would just draw your eyes back to him, the one who is good.
Father, as we sit, as we think of your goodness, as we confess those areas where we've been building our own lives, we've been building on just sand. Lord, we just come to you, we breathe in, and as we breathe out, we just ask that we remember and we can breathe out your goodness, the promises that you've given us, the characteristics of who you say you are, that we can trust those, that those can be the breath that we breathe that sustains us from one minute to the next, that we recognize where we're building on sand, that we recognize where we're going our own way, and that we confess that, we turn from that, and we look to you, that we find stillness and rest and healing and recovery just in your presence, just being with you. Lord, we just give this morning to you. We give our cares, we give all of our to-do list and all of the things that we know that need to happen. We give those to you this morning, and we ask just to spend time with you. We pray this as sons and daughters. Amen. If you would, on the screens, you're going to see the Lord's Prayer. And so as a family, we come together to say the Lord's Prayer each week. And so would you say it with me? Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Amen. All right, at this time, we're going to have a few minutes for you to stand up to say hi to somebody you may not know or somebody you haven't talked to in a while. We want you to greet one another. For our kiddos that are in kindergarten through 5th grade, if they want to exit to the side, they can check in. We have a small group for them to meet during the teaching time. So kindergarten through 5th grade can exit out the side doors here to the auditorium. So go ahead and get up, say hi, and we'll be right back.
Good morning, Red Door. Give you guys all a second just to get back to your seat. If you're watching on the live stream, good morning to you all as well. We're so glad that you guys are here with us this morning. All right. Thanks for being here this morning. If you guys are new, there is a hello card in your chair. You guys can fill this out. We would love to give a gift to you that we have and just to say hello and connect with you. If you go right outside these doors that are here and just to the left, that is our Welcome Center, and that is where you can trade this hello card for a gift. Also want to just remind everybody that we are going back to 2 gatherings really soon. So we have this week and next week are our last services at 1 gathering. And then when we get to August, we'll be back to 9 and 11. So mark your calendars. And then you guys, if you haven't noticed, there are some boxes over by the Welcome Center that say school supplies and backpacks on them. If you're like, yeah, I know they said we could buy whatever we want, but I just need a list. I don't know like what to buy. There are lists available at the Welcome Center, so you can pick those up. And you're like, okay, that's great, but where are these school supplies going? They are gonna go to Soul, which is a food pantry in Tri-County, and they get to shop for the supplies that they need. So it really is anything that you guys wanna pick up, markers, crowns, scissors, glue, all those things. But if you're like, hey, I need a list, like me, those are at the Welcome Center. And then, guys, summer is sadly gonna be coming to a close here pretty soon. I know, my kids go back August 10th. That's crazy, Fairfield, what's wrong with you? But anyways, if you're looking for one last hurrah for summer, there's something fun that we do every year.
Right?
Yeah. What could we do?
In August, at the beginning of August, go ahead and put the slide up there. We have an outing to Kirkwood Adventure Park. If you went last year, you know this is a great, awesome time. And so what this is, it is an old camp that they turned into just awesomeness. They've got inflatable obstacle course out on the lake. They've got a downhill tubing hill. They've got a splash pad for little kids.
Gel-Soft.
They've got like Gel-Soft. It's like paintball kind of. They've got a canopy trail where you walk through the trees. They've got mini golf, all kinds of stuff. And so we want to go as a one giant family. Bring your kids. Come on out. It was a blast last time. We're going to have some food. We're going to have fun. You can sign up on the app or on the website. You can register. We get a pretty deep discount for admission, but that only lasts until, I believe, next week. So you have like a week to register and get the pre-sale price. After that, it's just what it is at the door. So make sure you sign up this week.
All right.
Today, right now.
One
even.
last hurrah for summer. It's the first Sunday in August. All right, all you guys.
Awesome. Hey, everyone, would you welcome Andrew Dreyer to the stage? Thank you. Go ahead and we can have a seat. We're going to get comfortable. So Andrew and I've been talking this week. He's going to be able to share his story. We've been doing this series of stories, and it's been really, really great just to hear God's provision, God's just healing, his faithfulness to us. And just all of the stories that we've heard, it's been really great. And so I'm excited for Andrew to tell his. And so Andrew, you want to just kind of introduce yourself? Tell him a little bit about yourself.
All right. So I'm Andrew Dreyer. My wife is Amy, and my two kids, Annabelle and Anderson, are sitting over there. They sat up in the front just today, and today only because I'm speaking. Normally we're in the back row because we are true back row Baptists at heart. So
Yeah.
so that's them up there. We took pictures a couple years ago down at Findlay Market when we soon after we moved back from New Orleans.
So this is a good picture. If they don't recognize you up here, they do
Yes.
get to see a picture. He's usually got just an awesome cap collection. And so there's a plethora of caps. That's
Yes.
good, yeah.
Caps that my kids like to steal from me. So most of the time I'm wearing them, but a lot of times they're wearing them as well. So when Amy first asked me to share my story or be a part of this series, I told her, I said, but I don't really have a story to tell. I think she shared some of the people who they had already asked and some of the themes of the stories. And for me, as I think through my life, like I don't feel like I have a story to tell. And that's why she said, well, that's why you're perfect for this series.
Right. When I heard you say, when we talked and you said, I was like, great, you're going to tell my story too. Like, I feel like a lot of us in here are going to have that similar thing of like, I don't really have anything that stands out. And so I'm
Right.
really excited.
Yeah. And so like, especially as I think through my life, one of the things that stands out, right? Like I don't have what I would call like this rags to riches story, right? I wasn't really like a bad person and had this crazy salvation story, nor do I have, like just huge things in my life that God has done. And so like I'll always have lived a life of just wondering like, what is the story I have to tell? Because I've just lived an ordinary life throughout the course of my 40 plus years. And so, like I grew up in a home where we went to church, every Sunday. My parents were involved when I was a kid. They, led the different kids programs that I was involved in at church. Grew up going to VBS every time, our church would have VBS. I was always there, always listening. And even so much as like, as I grew into, teenage years, I was involved in the youth group. There's one of the pictures there, that tie-dye shirt. That was one of the first, youth camp we went to. And ironically, I still have that shirt at home, and I probably would still wear it if Amy would let me, but I think she made me store it away. But that was the camp where I finally decided to follow Jesus, and really decide to make him the Savior of my life. For a long time, even just throughout my teenage years, it took me a while. I wrestled with that decision for quite a bit. And then, at that camp, just one of the leaders just asked me, are you ready to, like she could tell I had been wrestling with it for a while. And so, she just came up to me and talked to me a little bit more about what it meant to follow Jesus. And, and at that time I made that change and decided to truly follow him. And then, a few years later, right, like I was, I think 16 at that time, 15, 16. And a few years later, right, I graduated high school, and I was part of that generation where the push was really to go to college, right? Like if you graduate high school, you should go to college. That was just what was expected. And I had good grades. I never had a reason, not to go to college. And so when I graduated high school, I was trying to think through, where I want to go to college. I had the opportunity maybe to go to New York, or I really wanted to go out like west somewhere. But then ultimately, I just thought, do I really want to spend all that money and go into all that debt? No. So I'm just going to stay at home and go to UC, live with my parents, and pay, in-state tuition. So I started going to UC, and when I started going to UC, I was trying to figure out, what do I want to do? I really had no clue what I wanted to do with my life at that time. And so I knew I had taken one chemistry class in high school because I went to a small high school, and that was the only chemistry class. That was the only chemistry class they had. So I took one chemistry class, and I liked it. So I thought, well, I like chemistry, and engineering jobs pay really well right out of college. So I'm going to be a chemical engineer. I had the grades.
These
I had
are
the
how
test
you make
scores.
these choices.
That's right.
Like
That's
go through the
that's
list of
exactly
like,
what I did.
how can I make the
That's
most money? Yeah, that's what I want to
did.
do.
I had
yeah.
the good test scores. I had the good grades. I'm going to be a chemical engineer. So, I started in chemical engineering, and it did not go so well.
I can't imagine why.
I remember my first day at UC, and I was enrolled in Calc 1 as part of the engineering program. We showed up, and the first thing they do is they say, well, we're going to give you a test. And if you pass the test, you stay in Calc 1. If you fail, you go to Calc 0. Well, I failed pretty miserably. So I was in Calc 0. And I barely passed that after that first quarter. So it wasn't going so well for me in chemie. And I remember just really struggling for 2 years. I was able to stay in the program for a couple years, but by the end of my second year at UC, basically my grades weren't good enough to really do a whole lot. I wasn't ever gonna be a chemical engineer. And so I was starting to look for like what's the options for either transferring to a different school within UC or to a different program, and trying to just think through like what do I want to do now that I'm officially not going to be a chemical engineer. And I really liked working with students. I'd worked with my youth group. After I graduated high school, I went to a smaller church, and so after I graduated high school, I continued to work with the students at my church in the youth group, and I was like, well, I really like working with high school students, and it was fun, and it was kind of fun just continuing to be a part of that. So I thought, well, maybe I could be a teacher. So I thought about entering the education program at UC and being a teacher. I didn't have the grades for that, so that wasn't really an option. And so like one day I was just Googling, trying to figure out what I wanted to do, and I ran across Cincinnati Bible College. Just through a Google search. I had no clue that college even existed at that time.
He told me I was just like, where can I go to college in Cincinnati? Cincinnati Bible College.
Yeah, I came across that.
And before that, you did. So we do have a picture of the college ministry. That was at UC, correct?
Right.
So while you were at UC, you were helping at your youth group. You also got involved in college ministry.
Yeah. So the other two pictures are just from the campus ministry that I was involved in. Some of y'all know Ken Dillard.
You can see Pam Schroer is tucked back in the back.
Yep.
She's in there.
That's a good catch. I didn't realize she was in there. Yeah. And so got involved in the campus ministry at UC. Was Google searching, and with guidance from Ken as my campus pastor, came across Cincinnati Bible College and thought, well, youth ministry, I can do that. I like working with students. I already work with my youth ministry at church, so logical choice. They're going to let me in because they didn't really care what my grades were.
It was only a couple rows below chemical engineer on the income level.
And then,
youth pastor.
That's right. And so I transferred over to Cincinnati Bible College. It then became CCU, and now no longer exists at all. So, so you know. So I went there, studied youth ministry, got my bachelor's degree in biblical studies there. All throughout that time, at the same time, I also held one of my, I was thinking just over there. So I entered the workforce at 18 because I like to stay a kid. So my dad told me when I turned 18, I had to get a job. So when I turned 18 on a Saturday, the next Monday, I started working with him at a Kroger plant that he worked at. They allowed college students to come in and work during the summers and during college breaks. So during the breaks and during the summers, I worked with him there, and I did that all through my college career, which started to be 4 to 5 years, and I thought I was going to be doing like an internship or something like that as an engineer, and then it ended up being a 6-year program because I started over at CCU. But I worked there and really enjoyed that job. And then, from there, right, I had the opportunity to meet Amy. You can see her; she's in the top picture, right? Like, we served together in that campus ministry for 4 years, and having started over allowed me the opportunity to actually graduate. We graduated at the same time because she was 2 years behind me. And from there, I had this call into ministry. And so we were able to serve for a few years at church over in Sharonville. We served as appointed missionaries through our mission board at the time.
I think we have a slide for that.
Yep.
So they were Ohio missionaries right here in Sharonville at Creek Road Baptist Church.
Yeah. And so we served as student, youth ministry leaders and as campus ministry at UC Blue Ash with Ken. We served through those two different organizations or two different opportunities. And that's where I really thought, right, for me, that's where I thought my career and my life was going to take off, because I was thinking, I'm actually experiencing, I'm doing what I was called to do. I'm serving in that capacity. I really enjoyed working with the kids there. We took, some cool trips, on mission trips throughout the summers. We had some good opportunities to serve at UC Blue Ash, but it was only a 3-year appointment, and there was always in the back of our mind the hopes that potentially the church would grow and that we'd be able to stay on full-time, right? They'd be able to hire us after our 3-year appointment, but that just didn't happen. And so as our 3-year appointment was winding down, we thought, well, what's the next step? Well, when you're in ministry and you're serving, when you have an undergrad degree and you don't really want to get a real job yet, the next step is, well, let's go to seminary. So Amy and I, as we were thinking about what the next step was, we were looking at seminaries and just thinking through getting our grad degrees. And so from there, we went down to New Orleans, and we were in New Orleans. Both Amy and I went to seminary, and got our grad degrees. I really don't like school. I don't know why God kept moving me through school. Hence the theme of it took me 6 years to get through college, and another 3 years in seminary, and I didn't like a single bit of that. So
for somebody who doesn't like school, you're like, I just don't ever want to leave. Yeah.
But we went to New Orleans. We studied at seminary. Even then, through seminary, I had to have some sort of job, and so I worked at Krispy Kreme. What I would consider some.
You're kind of burying the lead a little bit. So he was telling me Amy is very industrious. She had a job before she even got there, right? She knew I'm going to New Orleans, got a job before she even left. So she gets there, she's got a job.
Yeah, she's a go-getter. She had a job before we moved, and then I get there, I didn't have a job, and ended up just working at Krispy Kreme for a few years.
Because he said, I'm driving by, the hot sign's on, and we're like, well, if we finish this errand, the hot sign's still on, let's stop. It was still on, and they walk in, there's we're hiring, and she goes, you love Krispy Kreme, you need a job.
That's exactly right. So I applied, I got hired on, and I worked there for 3 years and enjoyed lots and lots of donuts along the way. Lots and lots of donuts along the way. No limit. So we went to seminary, graduated seminary with all of these ideas of once we graduate seminary, right, we're going to move back to Ohio, land a full-time ministry job, and be in ministry the rest of our lives, vocational ministry the rest of our lives. So I graduated because I had a Bible college undergrad. I could test out of a lot of courses in seminary. So I tested out of almost a year's worth of courses. So I graduated a year earlier than Amy. We had Annabelle along the way, so Amy also took a lighter load one year due to Annabelle being born, so she had a little bit more catch up to do. So when I graduated, we stayed in New Orleans for an extra year, and I had to find a full-time job because her job was the full-time job at that point with the insurance and with all the good benefits. Krispy Kreme did not have those benefits.
They had
the
other
of free
benefits, right?
donuts and free coffee, but did not have the benefits of insurance. And so I ended up landing a job at a local hospital system, just doing entry-level billing work. They had just recently expanded their billing services, and so I got a job there, and just again, the idea was I'll get the job, I'll work there for a year, and then once Amy graduates, right, we'll find a full-time ministry job and move away and serve in ministry, vocational ministry. After that year of working at the hospital system, and Amy graduates, and we just didn't feel like it was time to move. I really enjoy New Orleans, and I probably would have stayed there the rest of my life if Amy liked the heat, but she does not. So, but we felt like God was really going to do something through the church we were serving at. We really believed that God had great things in store for that church. And so, we started thinking through our options of, how do we stay down here? Do we buy a house? And do we, we weren't really living in the neighborhood of the church, and we really wanted to do that. So we started looking for, homes close. And obviously, as you can see, right, both my kids are in that picture up there. So we stayed in New Orleans for about 9 years about 6 years after graduating seminary. Enjoyed many a Mardi Gras with Annabelle after she was born, and really believed God was going to do some good things through that church. I think if you go to the next slide. So after I graduated seminary, at the church we were serving at, we didn't really have a student ministry there for a long time. It was a really small church. We probably averaged 30, 35 people on a Sunday morning, most mornings. But after I graduated seminary, the pastor we had at the time had a couple, student, like high school, middle school aged kids. And so we really started honing in on that ministry. And just leading that just as a layperson, right? Like I worked my day job and then, worked with the students during the week and on Sundays. So there's just a few of the pictures of students that we had in different events. On the right, you can barely see him, but Mr. Oscar was a pivotal guy. He was mid-60s Hispanic guy, and he just loved kids. Like he didn't really connect with them at all. Didn't really have much experience working with students, but he loved them like they were his own kids. And he worked with me for 3 or 4 years doing student ministry, just showing up and being faithful and just loving on the kids. And he was a contractor, so when we bought our house, he basically let me borrow any tool I wanted, and that alone made it worth it to be friends with him. So he's just like, why buy tools? Come get them from me. So we stayed down there for 6 or 7 years, serving, and
You're still working for the hospital system?
right.
Yep.
Yeah, still working for the hospital system. I'd started in billing, just doing entry-level work. I was able to move into more of an analytical report writing type job, and then ultimately became a supervisor of an analytics department, doing report and just leading a team of report writers, none of which I had background in, right? Like my undergrad and my grad degrees are both in biblical studies. And so I worked there for 5 years, and then as the church just started to move in a different direction, we just really felt like when we settled down there, we really felt like God wanted to do things. The community we lived in, the community we were around was ripe for the harvest. But over the course of the time, the church just wasn't, I don't know, they just weren't a healthy church. And all that we were pouring in and all that God wanted to do, it just was moving in a different direction. And so we felt like now was the time to move back to Ohio, be closer to family. We had both of our kids at the time. Anderson was about 2, and we really wanted them to have the opportunity to spend time with their grandparents and with their cousins more than they could when we were 10 hours away from everyone else. And so, we decided to move back to Ohio, but rather than looking for a ministry job, I had a solid career in healthcare, and so we looked to, so I started looking for healthcare jobs in healthcare billing and things like that. And it was really the first time that we made a choice or a move based on a job or based on a career. Previously it was more around, like just life stages or just different, or even just ministry, right? This ministry calling. Going to seminary was all about going into ministry and being a vocational minister.
And in New Orleans, you had said you'd continued to apply for ministry jobs.
Yeah.
And just nothing ever came about.
Right.
And so you moved back to Ohio.
Yeah, so I moved back to Ohio, landed a job with Mercy Health, and they were really good. They paid for me to get some cool certifications and to get more training and just continue to develop, even to the point where, like now, my job was outsourced to the company I work for now, which is still a great company. And I moved from going to school for ministry and 2 degrees in biblical studies, and now I'm a manager of data engineering. And I'll be honest, I really don't know what data engineering is. So,
but he does it. He does it very well.
But I do it, and apparently I do it very well. So.
Full circle, you're an engineer
Right,
again.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Went to school for engineering.
Take that, Calc Zero.
But the thing that I really want, as I think back through, again, I've, in 25 years, I've had really only five paying jobs. 2 of those were part-time jobs. One of them was a known 3-year appointment. And then now I have more of a career, a couple career-based jobs. But really, like, what I want people to understand is I've reflected back through all of these different jobs and these different stages of life I've been in, and reflecting on the fact that I live an ordinary life, right? I don't think I do anything, or I don't think I have any situations that are, just very specific, situations God's worked in. But God has provided me with a story. And it's how I view my story, and I think with each one of us, right, like God has provided all of us with a story, and it's how we view that story that has that impact on others, right? If we view our lives, if we view our stories of like, I don't have anything exciting to share, one, I don't think that's true. Because I think if you're a follower of Jesus, we all have exciting things to share. But if you just view it as, I just live this ordinary life, you're not gonna, it's gonna be much harder for you to have an impact on others' lives. And God calls us to do that. And so, moving back to Ohio, right, when we made that career choice, or that choice to move back more based on, a career of healthcare and not a life of vocational ministry, I had to really begin processing through that, right? Because up to that point, my identity was in the fact that I was going to be a vocational minister, that I was going to serve in a church somewhere, and everything I had done, even working at Ochsner, the hospital system in New Orleans, working with the students at Rio Vista, it was always still back in the back of my mind, like eventually I'm going to get back into that vocational ministry.
And every church you ended up at did not have youth
right.
to minister to.
Right, yeah, like, Rio Vista, when we moved down there, they didn't have a student ministry program, and, we were able to work with that. But then, right, like we came to Red Door once we moved up here, and at that time, Red Door didn't have like an official student ministry, like a traditional that we were used to student ministry. And still, God continued to just lead and to guide in those ways. Sorry, I like my notes.
Sorry, you're good. So I think like one of the things that we had talked about is this idea of, as you looked back and you reflected back on your story, and those feelings of like, I don't really have a story. But then as you look back, we called them like little breadcrumbs, like the Hansel and Gretel, like leaving little breadcrumbs and like noticing the breadcrumbs that were God like intervening and doing things. So if you can kind of talk about like, that's how we find the ordinary and find where God was at.
Yeah, and I did like what Beck had shared earlier, because I think for a long time, like I was finding my identity in that call to vocational ministry. That's what I was pursuing, and that's who I was. But moving back to Ohio, one of the things that I really began to understand is that like God had not called me to a life of vocational ministry. He didn't give me a calling. He had called me to a life of a disciple, right? To follow him and to live that journey out, live that call to follow him out, not in a specific role, not in a specific job, not in a specific situation, but just over the course of time, right? I'm called to live a life as a disciple. And so, yeah, right.
You can clap for that. Yeah, that is it. I told him that was the moment where he was just like, drop the mic, like that's it.
Yeah, I can stop now. But like as I look back through my life, I can see like through those different situations, through those different jobs I held, through the areas that I was able to serve, right? Like how God was at work, and more than just me being a student leader, more than just me being in vocational ministry. Choosing UC, right? Like had I not gone to UC, had I gone to some other college around the country or whatever, my goal was just to get out of my little town. So I initially had grand plans. Had I not gone to UC, I would have missed out. One, I never would have met Amy, but I would have missed out on just having that experience of not doing well in school, because that never happened before. But I had the opportunity to serve in the Baptist Collegiate Ministry, and that led me to be able to travel to China for a few weeks, and to travel around the country on different trips that we took. One of the stories that always stands out is I had only begun in the ministry. I'd only really started going to their weekly gatherings for maybe like 4 or 5 weeks, and they're getting ready to take, in my freshman year, they're getting ready to take a trip to New Orleans on a missions trip. It was just their cadence, and that was their year. And I thought, I like traveling, and so I want to go on a trip. So I went, and I think I was the only freshman that went. I didn't really know anyone, which was even more strange for me, because I'm a very quiet guy and shy guy, and that was out of my box. But I went on that trip, and we served, and I really just enjoyed the trip. But on that trip as a freshman in college, working to be a chemical engineer, we visited the New Orleans Seminary, and just having that, like we had an official visit, people took us on a tour, and I remember distinctly thinking someday it would be cool to go to school here. But I didn't have any inkling to be in ministry at that time, anything like that. And then, eventually, right, God led us down to, as we were thinking of seminaries and thinking of places to go for our grad degrees, right? Like God moved us down there and used that, and part of the reason was that initial
You had said he planted that seed in your heart from the very beginning. Right.
But looking back on it, I see that in the time I did not as well. Even in New Orleans, right? Like I worked at Krispy Kreme, and it was, if you think of a college job, Krispy Kreme's a good one, because you get, again, the one I worked at, you could have as many free donuts as you wanted, and I probably ate 12 every shift, at least, and had probably 3 or 4 cups of coffee as well, if not more. But even that, like it was by chance. We were driving by, and we didn't have Krispy Kreme in Ohio at the time. Like they basically didn't have any around, but I loved Krispy Kreme. So we were driving by, we saw the hot sign on, and Amy's like, all right, let's stop. I applied for the job, and I had very distinct, qualifications. I didn't want a job that I had to work on Sundays, because at the time, again, I was studying to be in ministry, and I thought if I'm working on Sundays, well, then I can't go to church. I can't be involved in a church. And so I went in with those qualifications, and God opened the door. For 3 years, I never worked on a Sunday, and I never worked on any day that I didn't want to work, so I could do, ministry things. And that was solely a God thing. I don't think that was, it was just God giving me favor. But I also had the opportunity while working at Krispy Kreme to build a relationship with one of my managers. She was a Muslim, and her husband had converted to Muslim or to Islam, after he married her. And we were able to have some really good conversations, just about faith and about walking life. She was somewhat devout. They would hold to the main holidays, but it was opportunities to have conversations that I would not have had otherwise. If I'd sought a ministry job during the time in seminary, if I'd sought after that type of thing, I probably would have had other conversations. But it was an opportunity to make an impact in her life. But at the same time, I would just have random people, right? Like, you work in a restaurant, sometimes you have different people come in and out of the restaurant. We were able to build relationships and just talk with regulars who would come in. Donut shop people come in and have donuts and drink coffee and just sit there. And sometimes it's the same people. But we also had this family who were farmers, and they would come in every 2 or 3 weeks, and we would just save buckets of donuts for them that would, were going in the trash. And they would come in, they would pick them up, and they would feed them to their pigs, right? So really, really good pigs if you would buy pigs or bacon.
That's
from
the
them,
bacon
I'm sure.
you wanted.
Right, that's right, because they were fed Krispy Kremes.
Krispy Kreme bacon. Yeah.
But one of the guys in the family, he was a younger guy, maybe in his 20s, and I remember distinctly, after months or maybe a year or so, I had talked to him a few times that he'd come in the store and just connected with him a little bit. But one night he came, and I don't even know, I can't remember if he was picking up the donuts or if he just stopped by, but he clearly was not in the right frame of mind. He was maybe drunk, maybe high, I don't know. But I was taking my break, and at that time, I don't think I actually worked a whole lot. I was like a supervisor, so I just kind of did what I wanted. But I remember sitting in the back of the restaurant, outside, and he just laid out his life story and just all the struggles he's having. And I was able just to sit there and listen to him and be that listening ear that he needed at that time, and pray for him and just pray with him through that. Again, just ordinary stuff. Right? I'm just working my job. I'm just working at Krispy Kreme. At Auctioner, similar things. I'm able to look back and just see how God opened different doors and God did different things. I could share lots of stories.
He's got so many great stories. And then there's the next slide of pictures, right, is a great representation of that time of your life, that God doing all of that stuff, but then how he has been able to use you.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, the ministry work, I've served in a couple vocational ministry jobs, and that was important too, right? That was an important part of my life. But as I reflect back, it wasn't the call to ministry. Me serving in those jobs wasn't my end calling, but it was my calling to be faithful even in those ministry jobs as a disciple of Christ. And so on the right are a couple students that I really was able to connect with in both of those roles, both at Creek Road, the middle picture, and then serving at Rio Vista in New Orleans. But Justin, the one in the middle, he was just a student that had no connection with our church. And interestingly enough, one of his neighbors just invited him to come. She knew she was an older member. He would mow her grass because she was unable to. And so she just made that connection, and she invited him, and he started coming. And I was able just to connect with him and be, that mentor, and be that, and to disciple him. And, ultimately he followed Jesus as a part of that ministry. But we had fun times for a couple years, just building that relationship. And then Austin on the right, that's little Annabelle with the mascot of the AAA team. He was a nutria. And if you want to know what nutria are, look it up. They're kind of interesting animals. But Austin, same thing. He lived in one of the neighborhoods around our church in Rio Vista, or down in New Orleans. And one of the older ladies at the church, he lived across the street, and she just invited him because she knew we had a student ministry program that was starting up. And I think he'd actually come up through VBS. He would come to VBS every year as a kid. But she just really started, investing in him, and he started coming, and I was able to just hang out with him a lot. He moved out of the neighborhood, and we would go pick him up every week, every Wednesday or Sunday. We would pick him up for the different things that we were doing. But one of the things that I was thinking about last night, specifically with these two stories, was the fact that, like, I didn't initiate the relationship with them at all. It really was two older members of our churches that initiate that conversation, right? They knew them as kids. They had that relationship. And so even, I think sometimes as like adults, we don't even see kids. Sometimes we see kids as nuisances. Even me, liking to do ministry, sometimes I see them that way. But they saw them as opportunities. And because, these, two ladies in their 70s, maybe, I don't know, Miss Celeste might have been in her 90s at that point. I don't even know. She was pretty crazy. But like they saw these kids and they invited them to be a part of their lives.
And you see Andrew is currently getting to serve with Annabelle there with our kindergarten and first graders, and does such a good job. And I think, like, just to bring it home, like, you've got a couple verses as we sat with your story that you're like, this is what it means to be called to the ordinary. This is it.
So, a couple verses. This first one I've heard taught on a few times, and it always stood out to me as, like Jeremiah and God talking to those who were being carried into exile, right? He says, "This is what the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, says to those I carried into exile from Jerusalem to Babylon. Build houses and settle down, plant gardens and eat what they produce. Marry and have sons, daughters. Find wives for your sons. Give your daughters in marriage, so that they too may have sons and daughters. Increase in number there, do not decrease. Also seek the peace and prosperity of the city to which I've carried you into exile. Pray to the Lord for it, because if it prospers, you too will prosper." Right? They were called to be a part of where God took them. Even though they were going into exile, God called them to live ordinary lives, to settle in and to be a part of that city. And then this next verse, something that I don't know if I'd ever really picked up on this until Amy and I were talking through, and she shared this verse with me, or this passage. It says, this is Paul writing in the New Testament in 1 Thessalonians, "As for other matters, brothers and sisters, we instructed you how to live in order to please God, as in fact you are living. Now we ask you and urge you in the Lord Jesus to do this more and more. Now about your love for one another, we do not need to write to you, for you yourselves have been taught by God to love each other, and in fact you do love all of God's family. Yet we urge you, brothers and sisters, to do so more and more, and to make it your ambition to lead a quiet life. You should mind your own business and work with your hands, just as we told you, so that your daily life may win the respect of outsiders, and so that you will not be dependent on anybody." Right? We're called to live an ordinary life, right? Most of us are going to live ordinary lives without anything crazy going on. And when I think of, just through the course of history, we don't read the stories about ordinary people, right? We read the stories about all these people who've done great things. But I think God has used the ordinary person more often than not, right?
Amen.
Like, those are the people that have those impacts. And just this idea of an ordinary life, when I think about, like, living an ordinary life following Jesus is not really everyday and ordinary, right? Following Jesus is exciting, and following Jesus can take us places that we would never imagine. And so when we walk in faithfulness with Christ, even an ordinary life is not so ordinary. And so one of the the biggest, I think for me, one of the stories, and just where I want to end is when I worked at Kroger, right? So again, I worked at a Kroger manufacturing plant through college, and for 6 years I just kind of worked 10 weeks here, a few weeks there. But the last couple of years I was able to work a few hours, 3 days a week in the sanitation and the cleaning department. And that gave me the opportunity to work directly with one lady. She was not a follower of Jesus. She didn't care to follow Jesus. She had a really rough background. But she knew that I was studying to go into the ministry, and we were able to have really good conversations. Never really went too far, but she respected the ministry. She respected people in the church. She just didn't have any interest in it. And so for 2 years, right, I just built that relationship with her, cared for her, showed her how to kind of do her job better, and that type of thing. Amy and I had served at Creek Road for 3 years, so I didn't have any really interaction at the plant because I'd moved on after graduating college. But her husband had been battling cancer for years, and I think even when I worked at Kroger, he had had brain tumors and was in and out of the hospital. Well, it was maybe a week before we were getting ready to move to New Orleans. And somehow, I can't remember if she called me directly or if she told my dad to get in contact with me, because my dad still worked at the plant. But we got in contact. Her husband was basically on death's doorstep. He is hospitalized. He was not going to recover. But she wanted someone to come down and talk to him about having a relationship with Christ, because she somehow knew, like, she still had that thought of, like, I want him to go to heaven, right? And so a week before we moved to New Orleans, I hadn't talked to this lady in 2 or 3 years. She got in contact with me, and I was able to go to the hospital and talk with her and care for her, and ultimately share the gospel with her husband, who was somewhat responsive at the time, but she was in the room, so she got to hear the gospel and hear what God can do in her life. And it all comes from the fact that I had an ordinary, like, to me, it was not anything fancy to work at Kroger. It was just a job for me, but I saw it as more, like, I tried to get to know the people I worked with.
It is that leading a quiet life.
Right, leading a quiet life. I got to build that relationship with her, and so when she had that, need of, I need someone just to talk to, right? She remembered me from 3 years later, and I was able to talk with her. And so I want to encourage you that, like, even if you feel like you don't have a story, we all do, right? What is your story? Reflect on that. Think through, what are the things that God has done? And even if it's not what you would consider exciting, it is exciting, and someone needs to hear that story.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. Let's hear it for Andrew. I think if you want to go ahead and stand, we're going to continue in worship. And the band's going to bring us into a time of communion. And I just want to give you just a moment as we get the stage prepared, just to start thinking about, like, what is your story? And this is the opportunity for your story over and over each week to come to communion and to remind yourself that your story includes a good Father, a Savior who sent his Son to the cross to pay the price, to bring you into the family, to adopt you as a son or a daughter, that you get to join in this by participating with us in communion. And so just as you reflect, as the band brings us into worship, I invite you to come and take communion. Please just be aware that we want you to come down and get communion and then turn and go straight back. Please don't walk in front of our interpreters so that they can make sure that they're able to be seen. And so, band, would you lead us in worship? And communion is open. One other thing is if you need prayer, if you're struggling with just a feeling of sinking sand and like not being content with that ordinary life that you have, or if anything else is going on, we do have a prayer team in the back, and so you can receive prayer there.
Here I am, down on my knees again, surrendering all, surrendering all. Find me here, Lord, as you draw me near, desperate for you, desperate for you. I surrender. Let's go back to verse 1.
If you would, just extend your hands in a posture of surrender. Just that bringing your life and saying, here it is, Lord. I surrender this to you, whether it's something miraculous you're going to do and magnificent, or something ordinary and still miraculous and magnificent. I surrender it to you. Do it in me and through me to redeem your world. Go, Red Door, be blessed.